Hey guys, this is James from TeaDB bringing you InBetweenIsode 100. So today, in celebration of the 100th InBetweenIsode for myself, I am finishing off my first 357 gram Pu'erh cake. So don't tell me you finished that 200 grams or don't tell me you finished that 100 gram brick or tool. This is a full-size 357 gram cake. So like many of you, my buying has far outpaced my own drinking, so it's somewhat embarrassing, but also probably true for a lot of us that we may not have finished a lot of our teas, but we have certainly not stopped buying teas. So today, the tea is the 1990s Bazhong that Origin Tea used to sell. So this is a traditionally stored tea. It's definitely sort of on the wetter side, even of some of those cakes that have passed through Hong Kong. And it's certainly not the best tea ever, and I think that might have played some factor into me drinking it so quickly. But it's also a genre of tea that I do enjoy and that I do drink a lot from, and that there aren't as many options. So we are definitely getting some sort of like bottom of the baggy samplage here, so literally the end of the cake, so it's a lot of more fannings compared to what the cake was normally. So the cake has obviously been very drinkable for me, and I think if Origin Tea has since closed, but even if I had the option to rebuy this cake, I do not think I would do so. I think this cake, I enjoyed it quite a bit when I first got it, and I think it's sort of a cake that, you know, as I've gained more experience as a drinker, I have sort of outgrown it. So the last couple ounces have sort of been like a bit of a sludge to get through, but I wanted to do it. I wanted to finish the cake, so I had intended to maybe half a year ago, but it has been going slow. So here's the Neife in the middle here, so the little symbol, so this will be my souvenir. This cake was actually sold without a wrapper, so I do not have a wrapper souvenir. Definitely going to give this a rinse. And so my process, similar to a lot of my traditionally stored or wetter stored teas, is to tin up the loose malcha and then just sort of drink for that, and then once that gets low, fill it back up again straight from the cake. So we are going to give this 2 rinses. So I would expect this tea to maybe brew out a little bit faster than normal, just because we have a little bit more of broken up material here. So, yeah. So those of you that are not familiar with sort of like traditional store terms, it usually refers to sort of having a time in a more humid facility for a couple of years, and then the professionals will store it in a much drier place where the cake will become a little bit more palatable to drink. Times will vary, of course, and people tend to guard those secrets, but it tends to create something dark and fermented and pretty easy to drink, in my own opinion, fairly quickly. Okay, so we're getting a lot of those dark, earthier notes off of that. And we're going to just keep this at a flash brew. One thing to note for these Yixing pots is, like, if you pour with, for instance, something like this Shibo that I have here, I can just go like this and pour very quickly. The pour is over very fast. But you see how long it takes to pour this? Like, it's quite a few seconds. So, as a result, this tea tends to do well with teas that, you know, can take that sort of more heat and more aggressive treatment to it. So teas like this are less likely to get bitter and nasty if they are brewed super fast. So that's one reason why I am using the pot for this episode. So brewing up a really dark amber, burgundy, brownish red color. And I'm going to give that another steep. I've also found that this tea is pretty alright for grandpa brewing. I'll usually give it a rinse or two, and then either give it sort of Western style brews or toss it in a mug. So it's changing a little bit. It's a little bit maybe more on the sweeter, maybe a little bit of fruits. Not quite as many of those storage notes coming off of there then, off of the flavor then. Some of these teas, this one was definitely on the wetter end of storage, and I've noticed it clear up a bit as it's been in Seattle in my storage. But you'll notice that especially for the early couple steeps are where you're going to note the storage more, and then as you get further into the session, like 4 or 5 steeps in, you're going to start to get into more of the essence of the tea. So don't give up on these too quickly. Give it a couple rinses, even give it 3 if you're someone that's really averse to sort of like funky notes. That'd be my advice to people. It's also somewhat of an acquired taste to people that may not like fermented foods and things like that. I think there are other aged tea genres that are much more friendly. So getting into the tea. Thick body, most immediately. Thick, creamy. There's a bit of that sort of astringent, well, not astringent, just sort of that those storage flavors still in the tea. You're definitely getting some of the tea here. I think it's been a little bit faster to brew out. I feel like this would be more equivalent to the second or the third steep normally, just because we're getting a little bit more surface area. There's absolutely zero chunks in this. So, fairly front focused, a lot of oiliness in the front of the mouth. You feel a small progression into the back of the mouth. Pretty straightforward tea. It is, at this point, pretty soft, pretty smooth overall. Leaves sort of a salivation effect on the cheeks. So one thing on these teas, similar concept to using a pot, which might pour a little bit slower, is you're going to want the water to just be really hot. I think it's a really, you could debate the merits of brewing young sheng at something like 190 degrees or 200 degrees. And even then I tend to side on the era of boiling it. But for teas like this, you really got to hit it heavy and hard with water just to get the maximum out of the tea. I think you'd get a very diminished experience if you were to brew this at even 200 degrees. Cheers. So it's even improved. It's thicker. We can see that the liqueur is getting thicker by each steep. It's a little bit less of that storage in this one. Thicker, creamier. We're really getting into the meat of the tea at this point. Sweeter as well, just all around better than the previous steep. Very thick, and the humidity that's happened to these teas in storage has really thickened them up over time. Another thing I'd recommend doing, especially for people that are interested in learning more about Pu'erh and how it ages and stuff, is once you're done with the session, just pouring those leaves out onto some sort of surface, taking a look at them, seeing what the color is. Usually the darkness of the leaves will indicate how humid it's been at a specific point in time. So ripe Pu'erh leaves, because they're essentially exposed to composting over that ripening period, will tend to be close to black. They could be a little bit lighter if it's lighter fermented. Teas like this will vary depending on if it's more lighter traditionally stored, which they will be a little bit. They might even have some green or dark brown or lighter brown to them, versus teas like this, which I think has really been on sort of the heavier end. So we're still brewing this out right now, but the leaves are definitely brown, dark brown. So sort of getting like spicier wood notes off of the nose now. Maybe a little bit of mushrooms and stuff. So a little bit fungal, if we are to get a little bit nasty in our descriptions. Cheers, guys. This one's a little bit drier, I would say, in the mouth. Getting a few more sort of like long on, sort of like dark, well, Asian fruits, I would say. Still creamy, getting some of that mushroominess into the taste as well. And this session is actually, I would say, pretty good, and I think some of it's been because it's been sitting in this tin for a while, and it's cleared up some of that dankness to it. This is definitely a above average session for this tea. Again, not a tea that I would look to re-up with. I think, unfortunately, this is sort of a tea that the Western market doesn't particularly well represent. There's not like a good alternative that I can recommend for a reasonable price. You could buy stuff like the Hong Kong style, which is probably a little bit better than this tea, but much, much more expensive. I think it sells for 170, 175. That's a decent example of a tea that has been stored somewhat humid and then dried out over a somewhat period of time, and I think that tea is a bit cleaner than this one, for instance. So that's one alternative. It's not cheap, but if you're just buying a sample or something for your own education, that's a good one to go for. So thick, earthy, oily, a lot of wood as well. Steep number 4. So probably the best one yet. Totally cleared up from storage. Clean, creamy, vanilla, sweet. Again, this tea is really focused on the front of the mouth. It doesn't have a ton of like depth that like goes straight back into your throat or anything like that. I feel a little bit sort of on the back of my mouth, but for me this tea is more easy, more finished in the sense of like being more fermented, really easy drinking for me. Definitely would fit into the daily drinker category. Yeah, I have enjoyed drinking this tea, even if I would not restock it. So thank you to Tony if you are watching this video for sourcing this tea and bringing it to the West. And this will be my souvenir for years.